Hello everybody, my name is Leo, aka KnockedF, and today I have a very cool tutorial for you guys, because today I'm going to teach you guys how I made a fan art for Path of Exile. So this is the spell I'm talking about right here. So it is the Summon Skeletons spell, and yeah, I'm going to teach you guys how to make this. And this is a very interesting tutorial, because it teaches a concept that is widely used on VFX, which is Soulercoaster. I don't really know how else to call it. We don't really have a name fully agreed upon on the VFX community, but most people call it Soulercoaster. So this is what we're going to be calling it today. So you guys can see here, this is our basis here that we're going off of. So you guys can see here, I recorded this video and we have a side-by-side comparison. So you know, it's not a one-to-one copy, but I think it captures the essence very well, and most importantly it teaches this concept, which is very important, the concept of Soulercoasters. Also, I'm going to be teaching some mandala effects, which are very cool and very useful to make radial decals and things like that. So yeah, and finally, one more disclosure here. We have a lot of disclosures. I'm not going to be teaching this part. This is a flip book of smoke. I made this on Blender. So we're not going to be teaching this one in specific. But I plan on making a tutorial on the future. And also, one more disclosure is that we're using some packs here from the Unity Asset Store. So the skeletons are not made by me. These are the skeletons that I'm using. So if you guys want to follow along, you can get those skeletons for free. And here is the environment that I'm using. This is just for fluff, just so you guys have something nice to look at. And of course, this video is you know, made by the same guys who make this video game, Fight and Fall. It is going to come out in November. So if you guys want to help us out and spread the word, please add us to your wish list. It will be very, very helpful. All of those links will be in the description below, so you guys can follow along. All right, so let's start. So let's go into Unity here, and let's analyze some of the stuff that we're working with. So let's take our skellies and let's first dissect this effect. So this is the effect right here. And the meat of this VFX is the Soulercoaster, in my humble opinion. So this ghostly trail right here, this is the extra oomph. And this is the first technique that we're going to be teaching you guys. So this is a model, right? This is a 3D mesh, and we're panning a texture, which I'll also be teaching how I made over here. And also, we also have this summoning ring. And this ring, if we look here, let me open the texture here so we can have a better look. So if you look at this texture, you might be inclined to think, oh wow, this texture is very complex. This must have taken hours to make. This is so hard to make. Look at the complexity. Look at the shapes. This looks very complex. There's no way this was easy to make. And if we look over here, you guys are going to notice there's also a summoning ring in there on the spawning. But actually, this is very easy to make with a special technique on Photoshop. So let's go through it, shall we? Let's start right off. So the first things we're going to do is we're going to create a new folder, and we're going to call this folder tutorial skeletons. All right, very cool. And we're not going to do anything on it. We're going to go straight to Blender. Oops, I have my I was setting up things before the show started there. So let's go into Blender here. I'm using Blender 2.9. You guys can use any versions you guys want. And yeah, let's begin. So we have a blank Blender project, and we're gonna press Shift A to make a plane. And as probably many of you already know, things have verts, they have edges and faces. So we're gonna go into Vertices Manipulation here. By the way, I'm going off on the assumption that you guys understand the basics of Blender here. If you are a complete newcomer to Blender, you might be able to follow along, but it would be nice if you knew the ropes of Blender starting off. So we're going to delete those vertices, which is going to leave us with only those two verts right here. So the goal mesh that we want to make, if I go into here, the mesh that I'm using, Soulercoaster, oh, this is huge. But yeah, this is the mesh that we're using, right? So we want to get something like this going. Don't mind all the pink. This is because I just, this scenery here is just for show. So let's go over here, and we're going to use the screw modifier. So in edit mode with both of the vertices selected, we're going to press G, Y, and then we're going to press Control. So it snaps. You see it snapping to the grid, and we're going to put this right in the middle, and we're going to press G again, this time around X because we're manipulating the X axis, and with Control pressed, we're going to make this go forward. So now our pivot point matches with the first vertex here, and we're going to take this other vertex here, and we're going to press GX because we only want to change this on the X axis, and we're going to make it go be a little bit smaller. So now we have just a line, right? We have just a straight up line. So what we're going to do now is that now that we have this line, we're going to add a modifier, which is going to be the screw modifier, and we're going to have this circle. But don't be fooled, because this is a special circle. So you see here on the modifier settings, let me make this bigger for you guys. We have the angle, the screw, iterations, we have all of those things. We're going to increase the screw, and as you guys can see here, this thing is going to go up. This is exactly what we want to do here. So let's make like something like 2 maybe. Let's use 2 on the screw here parameter, and here on the steps viewport, I think we want, this is how smooth, so if you guys can see here, this is very blocky. We want this to be reasonably smooth, so let's get like, I don't know, let's do 30. Let's make it really smooth. Of course, depending on the project you're working on and, your budget, you're going to use different iterations. I think 30 is fine. It's not going to be a huge amount of vertices, and it's going to look super, super smooth. I believe I was using 20 or 16 on the video before, so you guys can see that there was almost no distortion. But, the goal here is to teach. So, yeah. I won't make any performance concerns right now. Well, of course I will, but not that many. So I think I want this to be a little bit smaller here. So I'm messing with the proportions because I want this to envelop like a skeleton kind of size. So we can also mess with the angle. So we want to make this loop more. We can increase the angles. But when you increase the angles, you're stretching your steps through all of those angles, so you're going to make things blockier. So you're going to have to increase the resolution, which of course is more expensive. So let's go back to 30, and let's go to like 400 angles, 400 degrees here. I always have trouble saying the word degrees. I think this is good. I think this looks pretty good. I think this is going to work. All right, cool. So now we have our screw mesh. And what we're going to do here is that once we're satisfied, we can also increase the scale here because I think, I think the scale works. So now what we're going to do is that we're going to apply. To apply, we can go here on this little arrow and click apply or Control A. I don't like this workflow. Personally, I think Blender 2.8 was better when you just had a button. I don't know why they removed the button, but okay, fine, sure, I'll deal with it. So let's apply. Cool, so now we have an actual mesh with no modifiers. So when you press tab, you're going to go into edit mode, which means that you can edit the actual settings of your mesh. So we're going to go here into the edge selection mode, and we want to select this outer edge here. So actually what I'm going to do, I apologize, is select everything and then select everything and then shift click, sorry, on those edges to deselect the outer edges here. So as you guys can see, now we have everything selected except from these. And we're just going to delete those. So we're going to go here and we're going to delete the edges. So now we have a line. Wow, Leo, incredible. So now that we have this line here, by the way, I didn't do this before, but like if you want different shapes, this is going to drive the shape of your mesh. So you can use other modifiers on top of this. So a great example of this that I use a lot on my personal projects. Let me see if I find it here. I think it's mesh deform. No, it's not. Where is it? Warp. Here you go. No, it's not warp. Come on. Displace. Smooth warp. I think it was warp actually. I don't remember what. Let me find it here. Array, boolean, decimate, mask, mirror, screw, solidify. Where is it? Simple deform? Yeah, simple deform. So you can see here, simple deform, you can add a plethora of different effects, like this twisting effect is very cool. You can mess with the angles, you can mess with the as-is of the twistiness. So this is very useful. You can bend it certain ways. So look at this. This is very cool. So you can make all sorts of VFX using this technique and applying even further modifications to your VFX. So this is just an example here. But today we just want a spiral. So let's just make a spiral. All right, so for now, this looks very good. So let's ignore this guy for a little bit and let's go into the second part of this modeling process. So what we want to do now is create another plane. And this time around, we want to create two planes actually. So we have plane 1 and plane 2. And now what we want to do here is get one of these and rotate it 90 degrees on the x-axis. And we're going to have this beautiful plane here. So we have this X shape. It's very important for you to get this X shape because it doesn't matter where you look this from, you will always get one full plane worth of content, right? So this is kind of the bread and butter of the VFX. So now we're going to select both of these and press Ctrl J to stitch them together and make them one object only. All right, cool. So now we want this to follow this. So we want this guy to go and like wrap around this line. So this is the bread and butter of the VFX. So what we want to do here is go into this guy and we want to go to Object, Convert to Curve. So now we have a curve here, which means that we can use a very cool modifier that Blender has. Let's make it a little bit smaller because I think the scale is too big. Let's make it a little bit smaller. And now we can use a modifier which is called the curve modifier. Curve object. This is our curve. So let's grab our curve and drag it in here. And you can see already this is following along. So now if I get my plane here and I press G to move and I move along the x-axis, you guys can see here that it follows this curve. This is very cool, very useful. But it's not what we want, right? We want this to kind of envelop the whole thing. So what we can do here is, let's remove the curve modifier and let's put an array modifier. What does the array modifier does? Very simple. You increase the iterations and it just goes, it duplicates the mesh towards that direction. So let's suppose that for whatever reason, you're following along the tutorial and it looks like this. This is not what we want. So you can just change the as-is here and it's going to be fixed. So in this case, we're using the x as-is. So yeah, this, in case you get this issue, this is what's happening. And now let's go into add modifier. And now we put the curve modifier. Now we drag our curve in and voila, we have the mesh following along very nicely. So we need to increase our count here because this is not good enough. And in my opinion, this is too blocky. I don't like this. This is too blocky. Don't worry, we can fix this. So we go into edit mode for our plane. So let me rename this to curve just for clarity's sake. And let's rename this to X. Let's call this X for now. So let's go here into our cross, into our X shape, and let's press S to scale it, X to scale it down the X axis, and let's make it smaller. Because now you guys can see that it's much smoother. I think this is getting smooth enough for my taste. Let's make it even smoother. Why not? Smoother. Why not? All right, now this is smooth as fuck. Nice. So now we're going to increase our count here so it fills up everything, right? And one trick for you guys is that we're going to add later on kind of a fade effect on the top, on the bottom. So a good practice is to make it slightly bigger than you need and then move it along the x-axis so you have a little bit of breathing room on the top and on the bottom, which means that you're going to be able to make the fade. You're going to have room to do the fade. All right, very cool. So this is pretty much it. Now, to finish this, all we need to do is apply the array and apply the curve modifier. And we're done. We have a mesh. This curve right here is useless. We're not going to use it anymore. So let's just disable it for now. So now we have our X thing here, which is looking very cool. And we still need to fix one thing though, which is the origin point. We want the origin point to be here, right on the cursor. So what I'm going to do here is that we can go into orthographic view and ensure that our mesh is somewhat centralized. This one, it just so happens that it is already right in the center. So you can see here that it looks very much on the center, right? So all we need to do is to move this little sphere here to here. So the way we do that is that we go F3 and we search for origin point. And we were going to go origin to 3D cursor and whammo. So now we also want to apply our transformations. Very cool. So now we have a mesh ready to be used. So yeah, now let's do the UV. Oh, one more thing. You probably don't need to do this, but it's good practice in case you're using a lit shader with a normal map. You know, in case you're doing that, it's good for you to go in here and you do a shade smooth. So just to ensure that those faces don't have any normals baked in. All right, cool. So now one more thing that we need to do here. Sometimes what happens here is that there might be double faces or double edges. So we can do a merge by distance, and we removed 200 vertices just by 0.1 millimeters. So we can even increase this a little bit. Yeah, 208. All right, we removed everything. We removed all of the noise. And yeah, that's pretty good. So as you guys can see here in the bottom of the screen is very tiny, but it's just 200 tris, 100 faces, 200 vertices. This is very cheap. This is a very cheap model, and it's going to get you a lot of definition. All right, cool. So let's go into the UV editor interface here. And you can see that all of the faces are stacked on top of each other. We don't want that. We want the UV to go from here to here. So the way we're going to do this is that we're going to select this little button here so we have an equivalence between what's selected on both screens. We're going to go into the face selection, and we're going to press A. When you press A, you select everything. And we're going to do U, and we're going to press Light Map Pack, and we're going to make it, yeah, just those settings are fine. And now we have a bunch of squares. Now, here's the trick. We want to select this, all of those faces in this edge right here. So you can shift, shift, Alt, click to select all of them. So we have all of these little guys. Let's move them to the side. And now we have in one part of the island all of these faces right here. And in the other part of the island, all of the top faces. We want them to be exact the same. We want the UV to be identical. So this is a very important step. What we're going to do here, you guys can probably see, all right? So you guys can probably see here that all of those faces, what the hell? Oh, my bad. So you guys can probably see here that, my bad, 1 second. I'm sorry, I apologize. So we can probably see here that all of those faces are selected, right? This face is selected, all of those faces are selected. Cool. But only one of them, this face right here, has this white outline. It means that this is the father of the selection, right? We want the first face, this one, to be the father of this selection. If we want the direction to be like this, whoop, from top to bottom. If we want the selection to go from bottom to top, like this, we want this face right here to be the first one selected. All right, very cool. I don't know, how can I delete all of the grease pencil drawings? Oh God, I might regret this. Annotations, note, oh, we can delete it here. Cool, nice, perfect. All right, so in this case, let's make it from top to bottom, right? So we want to select this face so we can deselect it and select it again. So it's going to be the father. And now we're going to press U again, and we're going to do follow active quads. And then length average, and then we press OK. And we're going to get this strip here, right? So, but you guys can see that this one is the first one selected. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to press R, select all of them, press R, and do 90. So they're going to go vertically. So I want this to go vertically. And we're going to save this for later. Now we're going to go into the other faces here. Same thing. We're going to deselect, select it again. This way it's the one highlighted. And now we do U, follow active quads, OK. And now we have, once again, the strip here in the UV. We can move it around. And what we can do here is do R90 to make it go from top to bottom. Very cool. So now we have those two strips. We want to overlay them exactly on top of each other. So it's very simple to do this. We can select this. Very important, first one selected needs to be the first quad, right? This one's the one highlighted. And now you can see here, magnifier. Yeah, I'm going to use the magnifier for this because this is, I don't know why this is so tiny. But look at this little guy. You see this little guy here? This little guy here? You can click it. I know. I don't know why it's so tiny. But this shows the positions of the UV. As you guys can see here, this shows the positions of the UV. Let me get rid of the magnifier here. Blonk. So you can click on that little arrow to show the UVs. And you guys are going to notice that we are on 2 minus 0.3. We want us to be on 0, 0. Actually, we can put us on 0.5, which is going to be the exact middle, right? Very cool. So now we're going to do the same with our other thing. Once again, deselect, select, make sure this is the first one selected. And we're going to put this 0.5, 0.5. And now they are exactly overlaid on top of each other with the same directionality and the same UV unwrap. This is very, very, very important because later on, if you have the tiniest little move to the right or to the left, it's going to look weird. When people look from certain angles, they're going to see half of the texture from the UV that's overlaid in one way and half of the UV that's overlaid in the other way. And they're going to be like, wait, so what? It's going to look like there's a gap, or it's going to look like it's cut abruptly. We don't want that. All right, let me drink some water here. I apologize. But yeah. So now we're going to select all of these guys and we're going to scale them down just by pressing S and scale. But they're still exactly on half on both axes, which means that if we go in here into UV, we have this option constraint to image bounds, which means the UV is never going to go past this box right here. It's never going to go past this box, right? So, which means we can select these and we can scale them up to our heart desire, and they're just going, and they're just going to be perfectly overlaid on the image bounds. And now we have the perfect UV mapping for this mesh. And we're going to call this, now we can go here into layout. And one extra thing that I'm going to do, and this is purely artistical. So this is already like, you already know how to do this. It's the way you do it. So now we're going to rename this to Skeleton Soulercoaster. And what I'm going to do, because I personally think it looks better, is that I will duplicate this, Control C, Control V. I'm going to go into this guy. I'm going to rotate it on the Z. I'm going to rotate it on the Z by 180. So, you know, they are kind of like this, like against each other. And I'm going to select both of them and Control J to merge them. So this is just because I want 2 tendrils instead of 1. You don't need to do this if you don't want, but I personally think it looks better. So let's rename this. Instead of being plain, we're going to rename this Skeleton Soulercoaster _ tutorial, because, you know, it's the tutorial. Now we're going to select this, and with this thing selected, we're going to go File, Export, FBX. Let me drag this over, and we're going to save this whenever it is you want. In my case, I have a folder here called Models. All right, cool. And let's go to the settings, to the export settings. So we want only the selected objects to be exported. We don't want to export our curve. We want the mesh to be exported. And we want to call it Skeleton Soulercoaster Tutorial. Very cool. Export FBX. Now, let me grab this model and we're going to drag this into the Unity engine. Oops, why is my folder acting weird? All right, very cool. Models, Skeleton Soulercoaster Tutorial. Very cool. I have it here. So let's open up Unity. And let's drag this guy. Oh, not here. Let's go into our new folder that we made, which is Tutorial Skeletons. Very cool. And let's drag this over. All right, so now we have this mesh right here. So yeah, now let's work on the shader. Right, but the mesh is already working. So now let's make this shader. So one interesting thing here is that for this shader, we're going to need a texture. And I'm thinking if I should or shouldn't teach you guys how to make the texture, because this is going to make this video very, very, very long. So, I mean, I think we should do it because I've got complaints, well, not complaints, but feedback that people wanted to see the texturing process. So let's do it. So we have Photoshop. You do need a drawing tablet for this. I don't think you can do this like on mouse. It's going to be hell. So we're going to go and we're going to paint all of this black. Oops. Let's paint it like this. All right, cool. Let's paint it like this. Let's paint it all black. And we're going to use our whites here with a very soft brush. And very cool. And we're going to make some squiggly thing, right? So if you imagine how a soul is, imagine the soul sand from Minecraft, right? Oops, sorry, we're going to do that in a new layer because we don't want to lose our work. So we always work on new layers. So let's make a squiggly thing here. And now, so think about the soul sand from Minecraft. I think that's a really good example. Oops, my bad. So if you look here, let me get like soul. Let's try to find images of souls, right? Yeah, I think the Minecraft example is very good. Like this is the most like, you know, like its faces screaming, you know, like this is kind of the idea behind a soul. This is kind of the video gamey pattern that we have ended up with. So first you make a squiggly shape, then you create a new layer and you go to black, and now you try to make something soul-like. So okay, this is way too strong. Let's decrease the opacity. Let's decrease the flow. So let's imagine something like this. All right, this is looking pretty terrible, but trust me, you can make it look better. All right, cool. So now we have a basic shape of what a soul might look like. I think the eyes also being very dragged help. All right, very cool. So this is kind of a soul-like shape. And my trick is to then get the smudge tool, make it kind of big, and smudge it around. Right? This is already looking very soul-y. And because I think it should look a little bit deformed. So I think this looks good, for example. I think this is a very good soul-like shape. So what you would do is that you would need to make a bunch of these, right? So let's make something like this. And I think this is the part where most people struggle. Let's rotate it, flip it horizontally, so we get some more like these. And this, I think, is the part where most people struggle, right? All right, this is way too big. This looks a little bit off, which is the part of tiling things. So what's going to happen here is that this is not going to tile perfectly. We know that much. So what we do here is that we turn this off. We go here. We Control E to like everything. So we have this big image. And we do Control F and we do offset. And we click on the offset. And this image is 256 by 512. So we can put here 512 divided by 2, and we're going to get half of the image. And now we have this ugly thing. So what we can do with this ugly thing is with our smudge tool, we can smudge it around and blend it. You see the beauty of the smudge tool? Do you see the beauty of the smudge tool? Look at this. Look at this. And now all of a sudden, you can no longer see the seam. And now we can get our previous face that we were trying to fit, and we can fit it in here. And now we have a texture. Well, of course, this is a very shitty one because you need to spend more time, you know, refining the edges mainly, because those edges are looking like garbage. And also, I just used one variation of a soul face. You would probably use one or two, well, 2 or 3, sorry, so you can have a lot of variation. But as you guys can see here, this is a texture that works. And you might look at like, these shapes right here. Let me show you. Oh, fuck. It's here. Cool. So you might look at like these shapes right here and this shape right here, and you're going to be like, Leo, that looks like garbage. It doesn't look like a soul. Well, but remember, if you offset it, Da-da-da-da-da. It is a soul. Oh my god. And in the video game, this is going to be scrolling, like it is going to be repeating. It's going to be offsetting constantly. So you're always going to be able to see that it's a soul. Of course, I spent way more time doing my texture than this. But this is the technique, right? If you have the technique, you can follow along. So yeah, what I would do here, what would I do to make this texture better? First, I would fix those edges, something more like this. You know, I would cut into those edges, and I would try to like make it kind of mystical, kind of misty. This is what I did, right? Kind of misty. I mean, that is too much though, because this is way too strong. Like, this is not a soft brush. You should always use a soft brush for this kind of work. So if you guys can see here now, this is looking far more misty. Look at this. Look at this. So now it looks, right? You see there the edging? The edges are looking more like a smoke almost. Because souls, when I think of souls, I think of like more wispy things, right? You can also apply like minimize and maximize and those sort of techniques. So this is how I do this sort of texture, right? And as you guys can see, this is very, you know, there's no right or wrong. And this is already looking pretty good, not gonna lie. This is already, you know, for something I did so fast, I think it's looking pretty good for what it is. So yeah, we're not gonna be using that texture though. We're gonna be using the texture that I spent an hour or so doing. And it's much more subtle even. So this is what the texture looks like. As you guys can see here, I have like, it doesn't look like much because you'd need to tile it, but yeah, this is the texture that I did. All right, very cool. So now let's work on the shader. So yeah, let's also, one more texture that we need to do, I forgot to mention, is just a fade texture. This is very simple. I'm not even gonna teach this because it's like just a gradient going from top to bottom with a little bit of smudging. So, you know, it's not really worth explaining. So let's create, right click. Let's go into shader and let's create a new universal render pipeline unlit Shadergraph. And this is going to be Soulercoaster Soul Shader. It's kind of weird because we're doing a solar coaster of souls, right? So let's double click and open this up. All right. You can do this on HDRP, URP, doesn't matter. So we're going to make two textures, 2Ds. This is going to be our soul. Oops. This is going to be our soul. And we also want a gradient. So here on the soul, we're going to put our soul, of course. Our soul, oh, what's the name of the texture? Oh no, I think it's Ghost maybe? Yeah, it's Ghost. And here on the gradient, it's Wacky Grad, the gradient that I use so much. I love this texture. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do here is grab our soul and do a sample texture 2D. Wait, what? Why are you doing this to me? What? What? Ghost trail? I do not comprehend. Sample texture. Oh, I think I got a sample gradient maybe? Redefinition of gradient. I'm not sure what this is, guys. I'll be very honest here. Redefinition of gradient. I think it's because of this name, maybe? Okay, that's weird. Apparently, you can't name the texture gradient. All right. I didn't know this before. Now we know. Okay. Very weird. And also here on the main preview, let's use a custom mesh, and let's use the mesh that we authored before. So what's the name of the mesh that we put? Skeleton Soulercoaster tutorial. So let's use this one. Custom mesh, Skeleton Soulercoaster tutorial. What? What's the name of it? Skeleton Soulercoaster. Okay, it doesn't have tutorial on it. Skeleton Soulercoaster. Cool. So now we have our mesh here. Also, we want to make this graph unlit. We want to make it transparent, and we want to make it two-sided. It's very important for it to be two-sided in this case. All right, cool. So now if we go in here and we want to add a time node, right? And we want to multiply this by a rate of penning. I already taught you guys how penning works on the Firesword tutorial, if you guys want to access that. So this is going to be the penning speed. I'm going to make a card right now for you guys to access that. So let's put the penning speed in here, and we're going to plug this into the tiling and offset, and plug it into the offset node, and we're going to plug this into the UV. And here in the penning speed, we want to make it, I don't know, like 1.5, so it moves like this. Also, we want this to be tiling, so we're going to make this tile 3 times. And let's plug it into the base color of our shader and the alpha into the alpha of our shader. And now we have a very simple soul tiling effect. So let's go into the scene here. Let's make a material out of the shader. So right click on the shader, create material. And let's drag this material inside of this guy. And you guys are going to notice that this is already looking pretty good, right? I mean, look at this. This is already looking like the effect that we want. So yeah, but it's not over yet. Hold on to your horses. All right, cool. So we save this here. So this is going to be our main texture sort of session. Now, we want to put this into a particle system, and we want to color it, which means that we're going to be messing with the vertex color. So each vertices can have a color. So this is what we'll be drawing upon. And we're going to be multiplying the vertex color by the texture. So now we have the color of our particle will be this color, and we're going to drag this over to base color. Right now it's not doing anything, but when we put this into the particle system, it's going to do some changes. Now, we also want to make those edges faded, and that's where our gradient texture comes in. So let's do sample texture 2D, and as you guys can see, it has a little bit of black on the top and on the bottom. So this is what we're going to be using to make a mask. So what we'll be doing here is that we'll be taking this and we'll be multiplying. We use the green channel here for this multiplication because the green channel is a bit better. A little joke. Then we're going to get the vertex channel here, and we're going to split it. And we're going to take the A, which is the alpha, which controls how translucent the image is going to be. And we're going to multiply this over to the alpha of the texture. And the result of this, we want to multiply by our gradient. So it's a whole lot of multiplications here. It's a chain of multiplications. And we're going to put this into our alpha channel. And now, here, so I'm going to realize, hey, this is looking very similar. This is looking very, very similar. And look at that, there's a fade. Now, this is not over yet. Because if you guys notice here, in this little fella, look at this. You can see that there's a progression, right? First is just the very top part, then it goes towards the middle, then the top part disappears. You see, this is the meat of the VFX right here. So this is the meat of the VFX right here. So we're going to go into the Soulercoaster, and here on this texture, we're going to drag this over, and we're going to get this little guy, little fella here, and we're going to do another sample texture 2D. And yeah, it needs to be different. This is very important. It needs to be 2 different sample textures, but it can use the same texture. What's going to happen here now is that we want to pan this over, but we want this to pan over only once, which means that we want the rest of it to be black. How do we do that? Very simple. So here on the texture settings, on the import settings of the texture, we have this wrap mode. We want it to be clamp. The default one is repeat. We want this to be clamp, because what happens is, the way this works is that it is going to get whatever value is at the very top of the texture and is going to fill this whole region up with this value, and the same goes down. So we want to have a texture at the very tippity top is black, at the very bottomy bottom black. So all of this region is going to be black. All of this region is going to be black. This way we have this pattern right here repeat only once. Sounds confusing. It's really not. Go with me and you guys are going to see what I mean. So now we go into the UV here, and we're going to let's get like the tiling and offset, right? And let's put this here. And you guys are going to notice that if I move my offset, you see there's only blackness. But if I go in here and I go into the settings of this texture and I make it repeat, it's not going to be black. It's going to repeat itself. Watch closely. Now if I go here, what? Didn't save the settings, I think. Yeah, I need to apply. Cool. So now if I do it here, you guys can see that it's repeating. We don't want this to repeat. We want this to be black. So we're going to go in here. Instead of repeat, we're going to go to clamp and press apply. This is very important because now we have blackness. So when we move this thing through, it's only going to show once. Very neat. So, but how can we make our particle system tell the shader to move the UV? How do we do that? Well, we use a technique called custom vertex streams. So look at this. The way this works is that if I drag a UV node, we have 4 channels. If I split the channels, you guys are going to see that we have the R, the G, the B, and the A. And we have many, many UVs on a model. So we can manipulate those values using the particle system. So the R and the G are the red and the green. As you guys can see, the UV here, it's a green gradient and a red gradient. So those values can't be changed. Well, they can be changed, but you know, they already have a purpose. So we can't manipulate them because they are already being used by the engine. But the blue channel is not being used. The blue channel is a virgin channel, and is ready to be used by us. So what we want to do here is that we want to take the UV, okay? And now that we have the UV here, we want to add a value to the UV. To be more specific, we want to add on the Y value. So we're going to grab another UV, right? Well, we want to grab another UV. And the trick here is that, so this is going to be the first channel. Now here on this UV, we want to split it. And we want to use the blue channel and we want to add it in here. But first, let's do a proof of concept. Let's drag this in, this addition, and slap it in the UV. Nothing changes. Now, if I create a float and I plug this in here and I move this float around, you guys see what's happening? Our shape is moving around. But we want to keep one of the vectors unchanged. We only want to change the y vector. The x vector, we want to keep it unchanged because we only want to mess with the height. We don't want to mess with the horizontalness. So we add it into a vector 2 and we make the x 0. Since we're adding 0, which is nothing, the same as doing nothing. So now when we move this, when we are in -1, the image is fully black. When we are in 0, it is white. When we are in 1, it is fully black again. So what we're going to do in our particle is that we're going to move this through in our particle from -1 to 1. So we want to do this using a custom vertex stream, which is this B channel right here. We're going to plug it in the Y, and the default value is 1, so you're not going to perceive any change, but there is changes happening. We want to do this where? Where do we want to do this? On the alpha channel, which means that we want to multiply again. So we're going to do another chain multiplication. We're going to grab the green channel, multiply this guy by this guy, which apparently does nothing, but remember, it is going to do something once we hook up the particle system, and then we're going to drag this and put into this multiplication argument. So now, as I said before, if you look in here, you're not going to notice anything different. But let's get our particle system and get it going. So let me disable this, and let's make a new effect, particle system. And now here in this particle system, let's call it Soulercoaster, right? All right, so we have a bunch of particles here. Let's drag it over, and let's do some changes to this particle system. First things first, renderer is going to be a mesh. We want to spawn a mesh. We don't want billboards, we want mesh. Which mesh, you may ask? This one that we just created. All right, we can't even see them. I think they're too tiny, maybe. Probably. Let's make them bigger. Start size. Let's make like 100. I think we can see them now. Yeah, we can. Cool. So now, here on the render alignment, we want to make it local. So they're pointing up now. Very cool. The material, we can put the material from the shader that we just created. So we have this spanning ghostly thing. All right, cool. We don't want it to loop. We want the duration to be 1. So now it spawns just once. Here on the emission, we don't want to rate over time this. We want to spawn on a burst, and we want to disable the shape because we want it to spawn always on the same place. And finally, no speed. And the lifetime is going to be 1. So now if we restart, it shows up for 1 second standing still. So let's do some changes here. Let's change the color. So the color I'm using here is this kind of weird, like teal color, right? Something like this. I'm not going to be too, of course you would tweak this to get the best color possible. I'm not going to worry too much. I'm just going to get like a random color that looks somewhat good. And we're going to roll with it. This is more greenish. I kind of like this. Let's make it more clear, maybe. Yeah, I do want a little bit of the blue back. And we can make it darker. All right, too dark, mate, too dark. All right, cool. So now, let's hook up the vertex streams. It's very easy to do. So the way the Unity calls it custom data. So we're going to enable this custom data node. We're going to go into vector. Now here in the renderer, we want to find this checkbox right here, custom vertex streams. And we want to click on it. We want to add a little plus sign, custom 1XYZW. All right, very cool. So now we have this. Now in here on the custom data, we want to make this into a curve, and we want to make this 1. And now we want to make this curve going from -1 to 1 over lifetime. So now when I restart it, you guys can see that the animation happens. Because what's happening is that here on the shader, remember that I showed you guys on this node that it goes as I manipulate this value here on the vector, it changes the shape of the texture. This is what we're doing, but the only difference is that we're doing this through the particle system. So this is a very, very powerful technique. And as you guys can see, we have the first part of the VFX done. Now, if we open this up here, we have many, many more parts. So this is the first part, and it is done. Now, we have this little ring on the ground. And this ring on the ground is just a texture that looks very complicated to do, but this texture is actually very easy to do and very simple to do. Once again, we're going to open up Photoshop. You will need a pen, a drawing tablet. I think it's much easier to do this. So let's get a new document going. Let's make it, this is 1024 by 1024. Let's make it fully black on the background. Let's grab a pen. Let's get the white color. And now we can draw in here. Let's make a new layer so we can draw on the new layer. And I personally like, for that VFX, I use this brush right here. Kyle's Drawing Box. Happy HB. So this is the one that I used. Wait, is it? Did I use the charcoal one? No. I think it was this one, guys. The Ultimate Charcoal Pencil. Doesn't matter. So we're gonna use this one. Very cool. And now it's a very simple technique actually. All you're gonna do is click on this little icon here, which is the symmetry, and it makes those kind of things super easy to do. And we're gonna choose, I chose personally dual ASICs, and we're going to make this bigger. Cool. And now when I draw something in here, it is going to replicate, respecting the proportions. So if I do something like this, it is going to replicate everywhere. So what I did was something like this, right? And boom, the texture is done pretty much. But let's take this a step forward. Let's level up this texture and push it into the awesomeness level it deserves. So observe. We can double click this here, and this is going to be the layer styles. And we're going to go into outer glow, and I'm using these settings right here. You can use different settings. I think those settings look fine. And now when we draw, oops, did the symmetry got disabled? What? Hold on, brush tool. Okay, sorry. I don't know why it got removed from the brush tool. And look at this, guys. Now we have a little bit of a glow in here. So let's make, let me remind myself what the texture looks like. We don't need to make it look like what it does, right? But so this is what the texture looks like. I'm not going to mimic this one-to-one, but let's make something that looks somewhat like this, just so we can get like, something like so. It had a little sphere, so let's make a little sphere here. Well, this is not looking exactly like that, but hey, it's looking pretty dope, right? I think, ooh, this looks fun. It had a little kind of cross-hatching here, which I think looks very tribalistic, very tribal, looks very cool. And we can make something in the middle as well, something like this, in case you want to like make some cool shapes. Just experimenting randomly yields some very cool results. This is a very strong technique. And you can make lots of cool stuff here. So, don't be afraid to experiment. Look at this. Oh, wow, this looks very nice. But yeah, you can get a lot of like, a lot of mileage from this technique. And it is very useful. And I don't see people talk about this technique, right? Which is very weird. Yeah, I like this. I think we're going to do something like this. Yeah, let's make something like this. Let's make something crazy. I think we're going through overkill territory right now. I think this is overly designed, but I think it's also cool, just so you guys can see, right? Yeah, this is the last piece of detail that we're going to add here. Nah, do we add it? Nah, it's fine. Okay, so this is going to be the final texture. Super easy, super quick, like 5 minutes and you make a cool texture out of this one. And yeah. So the goal of this tutorial was to mostly teach how to make Soulercoasters, right? Everything else on this VFX, I will teach at some point in the future. I mean, the sparks are the same sparks I used on the fire sword. You know, everything else I already taught to some capacity. But this right here is the important part. And this shader, you can apply this technique to any shape you want, right? This is the important bit. So this is the part that I wanted to teach the most. And I also wanted to, you know, use the hook to teach this. Let's export this texture, actually. Let's export this. Why not? Right? Let's export this texture here. Let's see how it looks in Engine. So I have this texture right here. So let's grab this little guy and change it. What? Oh, I need to make it transparent. Sorry, guys. So we need to do this. I have a script that turns it transparent. Very cool. So now let's export it again. I apologize. For the inconvenience, took me a little bit longer. But yeah, let's delete this. Let's drag this over. All right, cool. So look at this, how it looks with this new texture. You know, it's very, very quick to make. It doesn't look as round as before. I think you really want to make something that looks rounder. But yeah, this was the main goal that I wanted to teach you guys. This was like the thing that I wanted to teach the most. So there you go, it is taught. Thank you so much for watching. This video is huge. I can see here it's over 1 hour. But you know, if you stuck around, I think you're gonna learn a lot from this. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. And please, guys, subscribe to the channel. Leave a like, comment your questions, give me suggestions for future tutorials, and most importantly, please wishlist Fight and Fall. Please wishlist Fight and Fall on Steam. It really helps a lot, and yeah, it drives us forward. So thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.